right. Hello and welcome to Puck on the Parkway 2025. It's January and oh boy, I wish the Devils would wake up a little bit. The Devils just fell 2-1 at home to the Philadelphia Flyers. That's the bad news. The good news is they'll be back at it at the Rock, another matinee tomorrow, Sunday, the 19th, against the Ottawa Senators. A pretty decent Ottawa Senators team, actually, so they're going to have to be ready for it and on short rest with some tough games played since post Christmas break, really, Dan. This Devils team has been going through the thick of it. I'm James Burley with Daniel Rebane here. Let's just jump into the just overall immediate reactions from today's Devils Flyers game and some of the less than ideal results over the last few.
Yeah, instant reaction here from us. First time we've ever done that. I feel like first period they looked pretty good to me. They were playing good. They took the lead. They got into the intermission 1-0, and then their best period all season has been the second period, and they probably played their worst second period of the year. So, that I feel like that was like the change in the game. And unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles, and the Devils have been in a bad place since Christmas break. They're 2-5-3 since that break. So whatever they did over that holiday, with their family, with their kids, they got to get back to their game because they're only averaging a goal, 1.9 goals per game, and that's just way under their season average.
Yeah, they haven't scored more than three apart from that one Hurricanes game post Christmas in 2025. The goals have dried up a little bit, but I think for me it's been more about just the attitude of these games. It's not so much that they're not scoring goals. It's that could have closed out a win against the Rangers on the
Yeah.
ninth. Could have closed things out against the Panthers. Could have figured it out against the Leafs and a lot of bad bounces go against them. A tough Western road trip. Those are never easy.
Oof.
Um, but I mean, the Devils have made a habit of being good in these really difficult environments. Going back the past couple of years, really, when I think about the 2022-23 team, they seem to seal wins at the end. They seem to close out games even when it looked like they didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
And they went on the road and took every road trip imaginable. They swept all the Canadian teams, and now not so. They're making things a little bit more difficult than they need to be right now. I think a lot of the bigger players on the Devils have been getting some criticism. I know I saw someone saying that Bratt's 2 goals in his last 19 games is a cause for concern, but I mean the guy leads the team in points. I wouldn't really hold that so much against him. I mean the Jack
Right behind
Hughes,
Jack. He's right behind Jack.
yeah,
But
you're right.
yeah,
He's a
he's
couple
right
points behind
there.
Jack. They're basically at the same output this year,
Yeah.
and Jack is also earning some criticism, and rightfully so in some cases with his carelessness in overtime and in the defensive zone. I think there was a couple of examples of that tonight against Philly.
hmm
Um, but this game was there for the taking. I mean, there weren't a lot of shots in this one, and eventually I think it was Konechny gets the empty netter to make it 3-1. But that last 2 minutes, man, it was all Devils and the desperation. You could feel it, but they were getting really good looks, throwing the puck across ice. Some really good feeds from the likes of Hughes, Meyer, Heishier, Hamilton. I really thought that they really could have gotten a goal, and then at that point, who knows what you get in overtime. So I'm happy I've seen that, but it's been too much of a pattern now to say that it's just the puck bouncing the other way against them. There's something that's got to change. There's been rumblings of an illness within the locker room. We know Stefan Nason had to sit out against Florida because of this, but he's back in the lineup. The number of games now in quick succession with the back to back this weekend, that's not going to do them any favors, especially with 2 matinees back to back. You'd hope that at least tomorrow night they could get another 4 or 5 hours rest, no morning skate, really get their legs back underneath them. But that's not going to be the case. And if this illness really is going around the locker room, I think, I mean, it's a convenient excuse to the way that they're playing because you know that illness is only temporary. But I think it might be runs a little bit deeper than that. These patterns are starting to get a little concerning.
Yeah, and I'll say this, like, what's called? Yeah, they just haven't been playing good. Actually, they
They
even
had
with
some
them
moments
even with
today.
them not playing good, like I feel like the one positive is that they're still in all these games. Like, they hit the post last game against the Maple Leafs in overtime. Like certain pucks go in, and the Devils have 3 or 4 extra points. And if they can get back to their game, then those are definitely wins that you'll see in the future. So I think that's maybe the one positive you could take away from is even with them playing, an overall, bad game per se, they're
Mhm.
still in all these games. They're getting points in overtime. They're still kind of grinding points out. So, you know, now Sheldon Keefe's got a job to do. He's got to, find ways. We might have to mix up the lines here. And yeah, definitely bring up that criticism for Jack. And we all love Jack, but I think his carelessness or him trying to be the hero is kind of bleeding into the rest of the team because I feel like we're seeing way too many odd man rushes lately, and that's where a lot of these goals are coming from. Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen can save only a certain amount of these. Like they're not going to save 100% of odd man
Mhm.
rushes. So I think that's the main key to get back to is you know stop being careless with the puck, defensively sound. Like even for the most part, they've been defensively sound in their own zone. It's just when they get too loose with the puck, their positioning might just not be there, and the team goes the other way, 2-on-1 or 3-on-2, and the puck's in the back of your net. And now you're trailing by a goal. So when this team is in the lead for the most part, they're pretty much solid. Other than a couple of times they've given up the late tying goal, but when they've scored the first goal or they go into the third with the lead, most of the time they're getting 2 points out of the game.
Yeah, I think the stat is something like 21-0-2 when they have the lead going into the third period. Those two losses, overtime losses to the Toronto Maple Leafs, one at home, one on the road. If I even think back to today, not to pile on the Hughes brothers, but I'm thinking back to Mitchkov's goal. Luke Hughes makes an errant pass across the top of the blue line, and he was a victim of the overtime goal from William Nylander against Toronto as well. So
Yeah, what has
a
changed? Yeah.
couple of bad bounces for Luke. I mean, he's made a lot of progress in terms of these defensive errors, but uh, I think he still has some room to grow in terms of making better changes, making better pinches, and just overall awareness of where he is on the ice. But I mean, he's been so good at that, so I'm
Yeah.
confident that he's going to figure that out. And as for Jack, I mean, his a little bit uh careless with the puck in the offensive zone, sees a odd man rush the other way. Siegenthaler has to race back and commit a penalty, and ultimately the Flyers score on that power play after a bad puck play by Brendan Dillon. But I mean, you're gonna get a couple of bad plays. It's hockey in your own zone,
Mhm.
and you take silly penalties. And I think that shift where the Devils concede that penalty is one where the first line of Nason, Heishier,
I
and
was gonna
Meyer,
bring that up.
yeah,
Yeah.
they held the zone for over a minute and a half, and you've got an incredibly tired Flyers first line on the other side, and Owen Tippett can only barely bring that into the offensive zone when Jack Hughes coughs up the puck. I think it was a great change. You bring Jack on, and you have your catalyst for the offense in the offensive zone with fresh legs, and everybody else is tired, and he just tried to do a little bit too much, and that's kind of been his downfall lately, is just trying to do one little thing too much and
Yeah.
coughed up the puck, gave up an odd man rush. Siegenthaler has to take a penalty. I thought they were going to give a penalty shot for it, but instead it's a power play, and Brendan Dillon coughs one up behind the net. And just like that, Brink makes it 2-1, and the Devils don't get back in the game. So I would argue that even when you make these mistakes and it doesn't end up in the back of your net, you can take a penalty, you could give up some big territorial momentum. All of this stuff contributes to not winning hockey games. And this is a team that needs to start winning hockey games again because what is it now? They're 3-5-3 in their last 11, 2-5-2,
2, 5, and
and
3.
2-5-3 in their last 10. So not a whole lot to write home about um, right now. I mean, you said you were going to talk about that shift. What else did you see from today specifically that that
Well,
that that spoke to these patterns?
Well, I'll just touch on that shift. That you brought it up. Smart change. Get Jack Hughes on with the rest of the guys. But when he's circling around the zone and then he gets squeezed along the boards and he tries to make that little pass that he kind of puts too much on it for Timo Meyer. You can't be making that pass because Timo Meyer's been on the ice for two minutes. Like if you
Yeah,
turn
he's
that
not
puck
gonna.
if you
Yeah.
turn that puck over, he's gone the other the Flyers are gone the other way, and we saw that. Even with Owen Tippett being tired, he still got that speed to break through. So I feel like, sometimes you just got to make the smart play, get it in deep, get the puck in the
Hmm.
corner, let another person change, and then you can just keep that pressure going on because it's a tie game. There was no need to make that play for Jack Hughes. I think that was just it's just always those one or two moments in a game that just turn the tide is. And then even on that penalty kill, before that goal, Nico Hischier is going to clear the puck and it bounces off of Kovacevic right back into the corner. Dylan loses the puck and then, Bobby Brink's all alone in front of the net. So that's just how it goes sometimes, Devils always deal with a slump like this every year. We always see it.
Yeah,
At least it's happening now.
right.
I,
Not
ta-
after the Four Nations break.
yeah, I talked to James pre-record, and I was saying, good thing that they banked all these points early.
Absolutely.
I think that's always a good thing is to start hot and end hot. In the
Hmm.
middle, you can find your game again. Hit a few bumps in the road, but if you can rebound your game heading into the playoffs, then nobody cares about what happens in December and January. So um, we'll just see after how they come out tomorrow. Jacob Markstrom will be in net tomorrow. We expect on the back to back, and we'll see how they respond. I think the home fans were in it today up until that turnover. It kind of sucks that they had to go home empty-handed because I thought at least they could get another point because that was the whole
Hmm.
thing. They would always grind it out to get to overtime and then losing the extra period or the shootout. But unfortunately, they just couldn't get to overtime and their streak of points, I believe, ended in five straight. So
Yeah, and while we're focusing on the positives, I want to finish with one more negative. Um, when that Jesper Bratt goal got disallowed for being offside, it started like the game already felt like a lot of these previous ones where it's like it's 1-1, it's a real tight game. The Devils are better than this team. They're outplaying them in some areas of this game, but it just didn't feel like they were going to come away with a win. And that's exactly how it ended up turning out when that goal came back. And it was the right call. It was uh, offside. It was pretty close, but
just
it's
offside, yeah.
definitely offside. And that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes in hockey. As for some of the positives, though, you focused on just like the third period, the absolute rush that they gave it at the end. I mean, they
Hmm.
really did look like they
Yeah.
had it. Even in the games where they're not performing well, they still have a lot to offer and still could come away with the win. The goaltending has been great. Allen today was good when they needed him to be, and I don't fault him for the goals that the Devils conceded today because I
Yeah.
mean that second one especially was just they left him out to dry absolutely. Uh, and they got another chance to go at it again tomorrow. So I mean, there's a lot to criticize. I mean, Markstrom's been fantastic when we've needed him to be this past month. I mean, just like every other game he plays, it looks like there's a new Save of the Year candidate
Yeah.
from him, and Jake Allen has not been a pushover either. So you know, I guess I'm hoping that this is just a case of whatever illness is going around the locker room, and that they sort it out once they come back after that 2 week Four Nations break. We've seen this. You mentioned we've seen this sort of slump in the Devils before. It's happened in December in the past, but this time it's happening in January.
Hmm.
And I mean, they've got a little bit of time to figure it out, but they've got to start winning games again soon.
Yeah, but let's talk about this goaltending because that's been a real positive, as
Hmm.
you said with Markstrom. Just that whole Western trip and right when they got home, he's just playing out his mind right now, and that's exactly the goaltender we traded for. I mean, when we couldn't buy a save last year with Vitek Vanacek and the others behind him, but
Hmm.
Markstrom could be beat and he's still gonna make the save. When that one in Seattle, I think was the craziest one. It's just like he's not even in close to the position. He just turns around and sticks his glove out, and the puck
Hmm.
goes right in there. It's just like he's got a magnet in his glove, and the one where he falls back, Martin Brodeur style, and bats it out of the air onto the
Hmm.
post. Just like you're like this guy is out of his
He's
mind right
awesome.
now. So I think even for Jake Allen, like today was his first start since January 1st, New Year's
Hmm.
Day. And he's just out there making he only allowed two goals. And both of them, Mitchkov snipes one, and then Bobby Brink in the slot on the power play, wide open. So like he made every single save that you expected him to make. So as a backup goalie, he's doing his job recently, and then Markstrom's playing is keeping the team in every game that he needs to.
Hmm.
So if this team can, start producing some more goals, I think we'll see some of these overtime losses or close losses at the end of the third period turn into wins again. So I'm not concerned about the goaltending, but what have you seen from Jacob Markstrom?
Well, I mean, I just want to start by saying, where would this Devils team be without Jacob
Oh yeah,
Markstrom? If this was still, I mean, look, and hats off to Mackenzie Blackwood for what he's doing in Colorado this year. We talked about that contract and how it seemed like it happened very, very fast. But he's been excellent, and we loved having him in New Jersey when he was healthy. He was an excellent goaltender. But this goaltending situation the Devils have now is oh so much better than anything since 2016 with
yeah.
Corey Schneider, quite frankly. So without Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen in this tandem, I'm not sure what the Devils would be doing lately. Certainly, these games wouldn't be as close as they've been, and for that, I'm pretty grateful to have that guy in New Jersey. Right.
Yeah.
Um, Apart from just the spectacular saves, the Brodeur-esque ones where he's reaching back and clawing and fighting like quite frankly, kind of like an old school, bigger goaltender who's,
Yeah.
more of a stand up guy, less so of the agile hybrids that have kind of taken over the sport with the creation of the butterfly and the popularization of that style. Um, does have flashes of Brodeur, but he's so disciplined as a bigger goaltender in terms of this position that when he does pull off one of these remarkable saves, it is that much more noticeable. Um, but the fact is, even when it's not been noticeable, he's been excellent. Just
Mhm.
positionally, just been so sound. Rebound controls have been there. We're a rush team. We get chances off the rush. It means teams get chances off the rush against us. Not a lot of rush goals do the Devils give up from loose rebounds, and that's a really difficult thing to do for a goaltender like Markstrom. So I've been absolutely satisfied with that. And another thing to peel away from the goaltending, just because we forgot to mention this, um, another player who was actually excellent from start to finish for the Devils tonight is the captain Nico Hischier, who played
Mhm.
in his 500th career game.
Yep.
Boy,
Congrats.
does time fly!
Yeah.
It's insane. I feel like it was just yesterday when he was on the red carpet up to opening day in 2017, and he said, "I like to hockey," and the rest is history. I remember being in that first ever game where Jesper Bratt had a couple goals, and the Devils beat the Colorado Avalanche. So I remember game one, and now, unfortunately, I think I'm going to remember game 500 because it didn't exactly go our way.
Hey, just remember the battle between Nico and Nolan. I mean,
Yeah,
those couple months leading into the draft were crazy because obviously Nico Hischier he wasn't even a top 15 pick heading into
before the juniors.
World Juniors. He has one of the best World Juniors. He scores against the US, and I think that game sent them up into the first overall pick because ever since then 500 games later he's been everything that we've expected from him. He struggled offensively maybe the first couple of years, but that's turned up ever since his third year in the league. And defensively, I mean, just talk about him defensively. Face-offs,
Yep.
him in his own zone on the penalty kill. He's literally doing everything for this team. Um, and even now, we've seen him more. He's showing some physicality, showing some anger on the ice. I mean, we just saw it a couple of games ago when he gets hit just maybe a bit up high, and he wasn't having it. Jonas
Hmm.
Siegenthaler jumps in, but he's the one that shed his gloves and went in at Matthew Tkachuk. So we even saw it today. He was chirping at I think Konechny or something. They were giving some hacks back and forth with each other. I think that's the next step of his game is to bring that feistiness into the corners, in the defensive zone, giving some guys some cross checks. I think that's the next step in his game, and I mean he's already the complete player, so I can't wait to see where his game goes from here.
Yeah. I mean, couldn't have gotten anything better out of that, right? I mean, it's not like that draft class had a Connor McDavid or a Austin Matthews or a Connor Bedard to choose from, but Nico Hischier is probably just as good of a face of the team, uh, captain, The as PK Subban would say, the star, the straw that stirs the drink for the
Yeah.
New Jersey Devils. Um, the poster child, really. I don't think there could be any better example of that. He's both responsible, offensively and defensively, as much as he is brings a spark with his skill. Literally, just the best all around player that we could have asked for, and I love rooting for him and that he gets to be the captain of our franchise. I mean,
Yeah.
just absolute a class act through and through, and just already a Devils legend,
Yeah.
absolutely. And to bring the conversation back to goaltending, because that is where we left it off. Um, Markstrom, for as good as he's been, and for as good as Jake Allen might have been tonight, and even on the first, like, is that everything that you need to win a hockey game? Clearly not. That is what the Devils are showing right now. While last year they were begging their goaltender to give them a chance to stay in games, now the goaltender is giving them a chance in every game. They just got to
Yeah.
finish the job, and take care of their chances, and make things happen. But I think there's a whole number of reasons why things aren't going their way. Um, but with that said, they've got a couple more games before this big break that is ahead of them, and a lot of these games are winnable. You know,
Mhm.
you've got the Bruins at home, and that's a vulnerable Bruins team. You got Ottawa tomorrow. You got to go to Montreal, go to Philly for a home and home. Then you got to go to Buffalo, go to Pittsburgh, and then you finish off against it's a tough game, but at home against Vegas, and then on the road against Montreal again. I mean, those are some winnable games, and if they can
Yeah.
get a little wind in their sails before the break, that'd be great. But if not, you got to recharge and go after it after the break, and then you've got only so many games before the trade deadline. I believe they would have 7 games before the trade deadline on the 7th of March, where they play the Winnipeg Jets at home. That's another really tough game. So, with that said, we can talk about some important news that's going on both in New Jersey and in Utica. There's some trade rumors going around, but let's start with what are the bigger pieces of this Devils team when you think long term? And that's Simon Nemec, who was the number 2 pick of the 2022 NHL draft. Um, Played most of last season in the NHL, and it looked like he was never going to go back down to the AHL, if not for the fact that Jonathan Kovacevic has been a beast. Brett Pesce came in. Luke Hughes has finally matured into an NHLer. They get Brendan Dillon as well. And then you keep Dougie Hamilton, Jonas Siegenthaler. There's just not enough room for a guy like Simon Nemec. And honestly, most teams would be lucky to have him on their blue line. Most teams would be lucky to have Seamus Casey on their blue line. And the reason I mentioned those two is Casey was selected to go play in the AHL All-Star game, but as he is injured and Simon Nemec has how many goals and assists in his last 10 games, has now replaced him at the AHL All-Star game representing the North Division. So very happy for Nemec. But the reason we bring him up, some comments that have surfaced that you may have already seen uh, with regard to his future in New Jersey, upset about the situation that he's not in the NHL, clearly believes he's good enough. And while this was a translated interview, so it's maybe worse than it actually was, it seems like he said that until this situation changes, I can't do anything about it. It's too early, but eventually I may have to request a trade even. So that's already started the rumors again. The Josh Anderson trade talks have already come up, and now the Devils are rumored to be a landing spot potentially for players out of Vancouver. JT Miller was brought up. Pedersen was even brought up, but I'm not sure if there's any validity to that even. Um, I know that I just threw a lot at you, Daniel, but if you want to zero in on Nemec maybe or the Miller trade, how all of
Yeah.
this fits together, because you imagine that if there's a trade for a player as big as Miller, a name like Nemec is going to be at least be floated around in the Twitter sphere, for as unrealistic as it might be. Just how does this all make you feel?
Yeah, just, I feel like this just hit everybody out of nowhere. Like
Mhm.
obviously he did the interview with I believe Slovak newspaper. And obviously, it's translated, so, maybe some of these quotes are taken out of context. But I just don't understand these type of comments from them. Obviously, you want to be in the NHL, right? Um, and we saw something similar to this with Adam Yurachek. But I feel like this is a completely different situation. Like Adam Yurachek was sent down because, or sent down from Columbus because, one, their organization hasn't been the best. And two, he wasn't playing the best that he could have been playing. And obviously, He's got what's his name? He's very vocal agent, and obviously, eventually a trade came to fruition this year after he requested a trade and he was gone. But like this year, it's not because Simon Nemec is playing bad. It's because other players are playing much better than he was, and that's just how it is. He's only 20, 21 years old. It's not like they have to hand you a spot. If you're not gonna
Hmm.
take it from someone like a Kovacevic, like Kovacevic came in and took his spot.
Yeah.
That's gotta be on Simon Nemec to be like, you know what? Don't get mad. Don't get pissy about it. Go fight for your job again. And obviously, last 10 games, he's got 5 goals, 9 assists. So he's starting to produce offensively again. But again, these comments just kind of rub me the wrong way. Like he feels like he's entitled to be in the NHL just because he was the second overall pick. I mean, I know it's a different. He was picked later in the draft, but go ask Ken Denico how hard it was to just get into the NHL. Like obviously, he was still a first round pick. I believe he was a first round pick, but it took him years to get to the NHL, and he was on a really bad Devils team for the most part. So. I don't know. I just feel like those comments were unjust from Nemec because it's not like they don't want him to be in the NHL. It's just other players are playing better, and you can't have 7 guys play every night. So I feel like if he was sitting up in the press box for most of the season and he had these comments, I'd be like, you know what, maybe he's got a point. Like an Alexander Holtz, like that's why he was traded for the most part. But I don't know. What are your thoughts about these comments? Because they've kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like he, you know, feels entitled with playing time in the NHL.
Yeah, I obviously understand the frustration from him and the
No,
frustration
no doubt. I get the
in in res
frustration.
in response from Devils fans as well. But um, I mean, he was one of the Devils' better defensemen in the NHL last season, and he
Yeah.
is still young. And one of his comments was translated to say, "Not often does a pick as high as me stay in the farm 3 years in." And I understand where he's coming from. He's seen Shane Wright, who was supposedly going to go number one in that draft, fell all the way to 4, and now is a regular NHLer with Seattle. If you're going to look around the league and compare yourself to the others, it gets really difficult, right? To then justify why you're still in the minor leagues, and that happens. And I understand where he's coming from. He feels like he's good enough. He's playing good enough in the NHL. If he was on any other team, he might be in the NHL right now.
Yeah, no doubt.
So but my question is this: this team took you second overall. They were the ones who believed in you. They're the ones who wanted you, and they still do. They have a plan for you. That's why you're in the AHL. That's why you're playing next to a guy like Seamus Casey, who is going to have a future in the NHL as well. But just right now, for the Devils, not only do they have their 6 best blue liners on the blue line, they've got the 6 that fit what they need right now. It
Hmm.
wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to bring Nemeth up to replace a guy unless it was a guy like Dougie, a guy who could could quarterback a power play, a guy who could be two-way. Nemeth is a great two-way defenseman, but the way he acts in the offensive zone is so unique and so much like a fourth forward
Yeah.
that he can't just be a like for like swap with a guy like Kovacevic. Because Kovacevic has now cemented himself as the shutdown guy for this team next to
Yeah.
Siegenthaler. That would dramatically disrupt the rhythm of his blue line if you consider that even a like for like. So I think it's more complicated than even we look at it
It
because
definitely
the
is. Yeah.
profiles are different. But that's not to say that the Devils should absolutely have a future plan for Simon Nemec. He's that good. He belongs in the NHL. Just right now, the Devils' blue line has been good. Even in this bad stretch of games, the blue line has been good with the way that it's set up. The structure is so sound that you can't
Hmm.
mess with it. Um, and eventually, if that ices out players like Casey and Nemeth, and that might be better for the team in the long run because this system works. And then you can get assets down the line for those 2 guys, which obviously I don't want. I want them to commit to these guys in the future, right?
Yeah.
Kovacevic, Brendan Dillon, those deals aren't going to last forever, but I think it's time that you really start to level with yourself and say, hey, if I'm going to be a part of this franchise moving forward, I kind of got to eat my time in the American League.
Yeah, I think, for the most part, back in the day, like you had to really grind your way in the AHL to earn that time in the NHL. And obviously, he they were bad last year. That's one of the reasons why he was up in the NHL, along with Dougie Hamilton with his torn pec. There was a reason why he was in the NHL. Remember, Tom Fitzgerald said, "Yeah, I didn't want him in the NHL. I wanted him in the AHL last year."
Hmm.
But by necessity, they needed to call him up. So, I understand his frustration. Every player wants to be in the NHL. And, you bring up Shane Wright, Slavkovsky. They're playing on
Slavkovsky, yeah,
they're playing on bad teams right now.
really, yeah, that's a good point. It's a really
Like
good point.
like the Devils were in that spot a couple of years ago because they won one of the lotteries to get up to second overall. You come into an organization that wanted to get better defensively and they go out and they acquire, you know, Brett Pesce in free agency, Jonathan Kovacevic from a trade. And you know what? We expected you to make the lineup. He started the season up here, wasn't playing the best. Jonathan Kovacevic comes into the lineup and he plays out of his mind. I mean, I don't I get the frustration, but I can't see why he's mad because he had the opportunity to be in the NHL this year. Just other players took it from him. So
Yeah.
I think, you got to go grind your way in the AHL. Just your opportunity is going to come again. It's not like you're you've lost all your value. You don't have a future with the team. They obviously see you as the guy going forward on that decor along with Luke Hughes. I feel like they see Simon Nemec and Luke Hughes as the first line D pair for the next decade going forward. It's
Yeah.
but it's just got to be on Nemec to get back to the NHL. And I know it's hard, but like that's just what it is now for good teams. You don't see on good other teams around the league, you don't see guys 20, 21 year olds trying pushing for NHL spots. So it's just gotten harder for him. He's got to grind his way, and I feel like it's eventually going to come. Like we haven't seen an injury from one of these guys on the D core this year. So eventually that's going to come. Like, not everybody's going to stay healthy. He's going to get his opportunity. I think he's just got to wait his time. And I think this is the best opportunity for him. If he goes to Vancouver, maybe he takes that leap, or another team if he gets traded and he takes that leap into his potential. But I think New Jersey he fits what New Jersey wants to do, and I feel like if he went anywhere else, he might just bust. So we'll have to see. We could talk about JT Miller unless you want to touch on Nemec just a bit more. But yeah, this situation could get ugly, quicker than most people want. But I don't know. I just feel like New Jersey's got to put their foot down and be like, nah, we're not allowing this.
Well, no, I think it's a good segue because um, while I hope, and I'll leave the name talk at this, I hope that this becomes a source of motivation rather than a source of resentment
Exactly.
for the
Yeah.
team because this is the team that believed in you. This is the team
Hmm.
that wants a future for you. I think if not for the injuries, for as good as he was at the NHL level last year, he proved that he belonged at that level. If not for the injuries, he wouldn't have had that opportunity really.
Exactly.
And I think that kind of hurt his development a little bit because you want to refine him, become that responsible two-way defenseman that he can be. He
Hmm.
can be the key blue liner for this team moving forward. Could really move the needle for this franchise long term. So you don't want to let go of that. And I hope he's not part of any packages in a trade with Vancouver. Which
He better not be.
and if I'm being honest, the Vancouver stuff kind of just seems sprung on me. I don't know where that initially originated. Um,
TSN.
but yes, okay, TSN. But I mean, they said that a number of teams are trying to get in conversation with the Canucks. Obviously, a team built for the playoffs that aren't playing like that fully at the moment. That means that there's some good players that could be going around for sale. And the Devils, they're a good team, but they're one or two steps away from being a great team. Could be buyers. So this could all just be conjecture. You don't know if there's ever really any real talks out there. Um, but if let's look at it kindly. If the Devils are truly in the market for a guy like JT Miller, a guy like Elias Pettersson, we're hearing Miller more than anything else. So let's talk about that. what would a guy like that bring to this Devils team, and how would you go about packaging a trade the other way?
Well, first we have to bring up why these guys' names are on the market in the first place because, you know, on a normal team, these two types of players would be like untradeable.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason, there is a very toxic locker room in Vancouver, and Elias Pettersson and JT Miller allegedly just don't vibe together. And, coaching staff and, management haven't stepped in to nip it in the butt. And it's just, gone overboard. And at a certain point, I think they've come to, a decision where these two can't play on a team together. So I think they're looking to trade one or both of them. Either at the deadline or in the offseason. I think it's just gotten that bad. Um, but let's just talk about JT Miller because that's been the specific name brought up by, I believe, Chris Johnson was one of them from TSN. And then on another show as well on TSN, they brought up, they placed JT Miller's name with the Devils. Let's just say this. JT Miller's a really good player offensively. Defensively, he leaves some things to desire. He could be lazy at some points. But offensively, he's one of the most gifted offensive players in the league. We've seen it. He put up 100 points, I think, what is it, 2 years ago? Maybe even last year. Like he's got that. So if you bring a guy in like that, you play him with a Jack Hughes because he can take faceoffs. I believe he's up to 58% on his faceoffs this year, and he's won over 300. So that's a good, mark right there. Um, that could help ease Jack into learning faceoffs more and more going into the future. You could rely on JT to take those, and JT could just go off onto his left wing after the faceoff. I think bringing a guy like that could definitely help the top six offensively because they've struggled a bit lately. But I don't know. I just think obviously his value has decreased because of this situation. And obviously, again, I said this on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Vancouver has no leverage in the situation. Everybody knows they're going to trade one of these guys. So they're obviously still going to get a good package, but they have no right to go around asking for a team's top three prospects. They have no right to do that. There's no leverage. In my opinion, they have no leverage to do that. So I think they'll still get a good haul. So if you're asking what it could cost, maybe like a Ham and Aho, a conditional second round pick that could turn into a first, if the Devils make a conference final or the Stanley Cup final, and then maybe Dawson Mercer or something like that, because they'll have to send over some money somewhere. Um, I just don't know. We'll have to see. It is definitely a complicated deal just because of all these intangibles going on. Obviously, the Devils would have to shed money. What does Vancouver want? How do other teams value him? It's just a weird situation going around right now, and everything kind of just caught everybody off guard that one night where it's just like, oh yeah, the Devils are really interested in JT Miller, and I was like, oh, okay. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on JT Miller?
Well, first and foremost, this is a guy who's been point per game really every season since 2019-20.
Yeah.
So this is a proven guy you're going to get. The
Mm.
face-off numbers are there. He's at 57.9, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, but we're talking about another $8 million player who is contracted for the next one, two,
Oh,
three, four,
yeah. I
five
forgot.
seasons.
I forgot to bring up. Rumor is that the cap's going to go up exponentially next year. So,
Hmm.
people bring up a contract right now. I don't think either one of these guys' contracts are going to be a problem for the team going forward, even with like extensions for Luke Hughes or Kovacevic, whoever you want. I think they'll be fine. Financially, cap wise, I think they'll have the flexibility still. So I contracts don't really mean anything right now for me with both of them. I think New Jersey could take both of them on with no problem.
Yeah, well, that's just the context for where we're at right now.
Yeah.
I think it's important to know what the expectations are for the salary cap in the future. But this is a big contract. We're not
Yes.
expecting
Oh, it
Luke
is. Yeah.
Hughes, Jonathan Kovacevic. They'll like those guys. They'll get good money, but this is great money, especially for the NHL, considering what the NHL compares to the other top five leagues, not top five leagues, top four in the US, top five leagues, thinking European soccer. But the fact of the matter is, this is a player who would exponentially improve the top six, but I think it would be difficult to find exactly where he would fit in because while the center depth definitely needs improvement, this is now another left-handed shot too.
Yeah.
And while Stefan Nason has really made the most of a good opportunity being the right-handed shot to get to play with the top six for this Devils team, he also fits the bill of like that net front presence type of guy that the Devils don't really have. I think Miller is that like two-way sort of forward that would complement a Heishier and a Meyer really well. But then I think it gets a little bit crowded again with left-handed players because that's just where they've found problems with before. And I know that that's a really specific thing, but I think it does matter to a degree, and I think it would detract from his output overall and might not be a perfect fit specifically. But I mean, this is a great player that you could definitely uh, get some more production out of. Would make the players around him better, if not for that one little tidbit. But I don't know what that means in terms of a package going the other way. I wouldn't love to give away like a Lenny Hemenaho type. He's been scoring goals for fun in the European leagues, and while I love what JT Miller could bring to this team, I don't know if this is exactly the type of move I would make right now. As far as players who are going to be available ahead of the trade deadline, if he's towards the top of that list, and the names start to whittle down, and there's fewer and fewer guys who really are that impressive, I think you snap at it, you get it, and you go. But yeah, I'd be wary, and yes, the Canucks don't have a whole lot of leverage, but I'd still be wary about what you're giving the other way because
Yeah.
long term, there's a lot of guys that I want to see come through this Devils team.
I think this is just a luxury kind of thing that the Devils are looking at. Like they're obviously looking to possibly take advantage of the situation going on in Vancouver. And they're, testing the waters. If they can find a deal that they're comfortable making, I think they make it. But if Vancouver comes out of nowhere and says, "Yeah, we want Seamus Casey or we want
Mm-hmm.
a Simon Nemec," you hang up the phone so fast. Like no, like JT Miller's a good player. If he was if this was 2 years ago, I'd say, you know what, you might have that might we might have to give up one of those guys. But with all the chaos going around him, with what happened, I think it was 2 nights ago where they got scored on and he's just circling around the top of the zone. It's just a bad look. Like it looks like he might have quit on the team at this point. So a lot of things going on in Vancouver. Again, obviously, I think JT Miller is a great offensive player. They're gonna get a good package for him if that's the guy that they trade. I just don't think they're in the right, you know, situation to go ask for one of the best, right-handed D prospects in all of hockey. So
Yeah.
we'll have to see. Um, I want to touch on Elias Pettersson as well because obviously they're going to get rid of one of them, maybe even both. I think that type of a trade would be better suited for the off season because
Mm-hmm.
obviously he's making way more than JT Miller. He's in the 11s, so like
Yeah.
he would shatter what New Jersey's paying anybody right now. But when Elias Pettersson's on his game, he's one of the best players, like one of the best two-way players in the sport. So if you're able to add him right behind Nico Hischier onto a line with Jack Hughes, if you have, your 1-2 as Nico Hischier and Elias Pettersson, I mean, that rivals anybody. That would rival. I wouldn't say they would be above Edmonton, but they're definitely in the top three with
Yeah.
centers in the league. But that would definitely be a harder deal to pull off just because he is making 11. I think he's making 11.6 or something.
11-6. Yep.
Yeah. So I think he's the guy I would go after personally because I feel like he brings that two-way game. Obviously, I believe he's another lefty. I just don't think you're going to be able to get away from the amount of lefties on the team. But I don't know. I just feel like if the Devils can pull off one of these trades without giving up too much, because I feel like they'll have to give up something. That's why I brought up Lenny Hamanaho. I think
Mm-hmm.
he's the more realistic guy that you can give up, along with like a Dawson Mercer. just for the cap reasons.
I wanted to bring up Mercer.
Yeah, you could bring up Mercer.
Well, I just because I think I've seen a bit of a spark in his game actually. While the team has been a little bit worse, he's kind of taken a half step forward in terms of his production level, both defensively and offensively. I've been impressed with him, but that only means that his name is going to start to show up in these trade rumors a little bit more. And he was a guy who's been talked about in the past as potential trade bait. He kind of lies somewhere in between the top six and the bottom six in terms of where he fits into the team and
Yeah,
hasn't hit the goals total that he would like, although he's been picking that up a little bit lately. He's kind of in the same boat as Palat and Tatar, who have kind of Tatar doesn't have the numbers to back it up, but have both all three of those guys have been playing better hockey lately, even as the team has taken a bit of a slide. Um, so I think he's going to be a realistic option moving forward of guys that they might consider trading. And he's becoming sort of a fan favorite now as a guy who hasn't missed a game in more than 3 seasons. So I guess it becomes a really interesting conversation to start having about Mercer once these trade talks really start to solidify and we get closer to the deadline.
yeah, and obviously that would be a tough trade, to replace a one of your better bottom six guys, with another top six offensive player. But I think that's the move they would have to make if they were going to try to pull one of those deals off. Is Dawson Mercer's a great player. I think we had better expectations that he might make that step into the top six. But obviously, right now he's being blocked by certain guys, and even when he was getting that top six usage, he just wasn't producing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think he's kind of stuck in that tweener, third line, uh, gets an opportunity with the second line, and just hasn't been clicking offensively at least. Defensively, he's been really good. Today, even he was playing center. I thought he did a fantastic job. I didn't really pay attention to his face-off numbers, but um, I think other teams look at a guy like Dawson Mercer and say, "Yeah, he could probably improve our top six." So I think he'd be the number one piece you'd probably have to move if you're gonna acquire another top six winger in the future.
Yeah, and I agree with you that that hurts because he not only is he like a fan favorite, big locker room guy, but he's got a very important role in this team, penalty kill, second power play,
Mhm.
and he's really started to become the player that we've known now in these last 4 or 5 weeks of this season. He's really started to change his game to an effect. And he was getting a lot of criticism earlier this year, and I think he deserved a bit of it. Now he's kind of turned a bit of a corner, and while he hasn't hit his stride fully, I think he's back in the saddle. It's not a guy I want to see go, if I'm being honest. I think a
Definitely,
lot of
yeah.
fans wouldn't want to see him go, but um, could be valuable to another franchise in case you bring in a big guy. And we talked about guys in Utica. I mean, Hallinan is up now. Dowling has been good. Playing in bottom 6 minutes this year. While a guy like Curtis Lazar has, kind of taken a step back since coming back from injury, hasn't really been great. There's been discussions about improving this bottom six, and you trade a guy like Mercer for a guy like Miller. It's another hole in the bottom six you got to fill. So,
Yep.
so, and this will be where we finish for the episode because I think we've covered a lot, and we got to get going because we got some NFL playoffs we got to start tuning in for big Texans Chiefs game. But I think there's something to be said about re-solidifying this bottom six, and if you trade those guys, who do you bring in? Who do you think is your perfect bottom six moving forward? I think right now it looks like Mercer and I guess you could say Paula, Lazar, Dowling, Bastion. I mean, McDermott is coming in and out, but just
Don't
who do you
forget
see as being
Cotter.
part of that? Cotter, of course. Cotter for me is still in my brain is sort of a top six of the way he started the year, but yeah, no, obviously he's in the bottom six as well. Just how do you see this bottom six shaping out? Do you think they go the trade route for this area of the ice as well?
I think, if they're not able to pull off a big move like a JT Miller, I think solidifying that third center spot would be the way they would go. But I feel like, going forward into like next year, if you're projecting out guys that are gonna be pushing for bottom six roles, I think they have a bunch of guys that, fill the roles that they're looking for. They just don't have the room for them right now. I bring up like a Nolan Foote. Nolan Foote's having a really good year down in Utica. Obviously missed a lot of last season with a back injury, but he's pushing Brian Howland and he's tied in points this season in less games. By the way, he's got 9 goals and
Mhm.
12 assists. I have written down. A big guy, power forward, could get in on the forecheck, can score whenever. He's already scored in the NHL. I think people forget when he's been given time. He's had moments in the NHL. He's already got a couple goals in the show. So I think him. He's getting a bit older now. Like he's already, I believe, 24, 25. He's pushing that, getting close to UFA territory. I think eventually they're going to have to give him that extended look. And I think, if they're going to look to remake the bottom six next year with some younger, cheaper talent, Nolan Foot's definitely one of them. I think he brings that spark that the Devils could be missing this year. What do you think about Nolan Foot?
I mean, I think Nolan Foot is kind of the guy who's been so close now for a little while
Yeah,
that I mean,
there's been a bunch of guys like that.
yeah, and I think every NHL team has guys like that, and always has. There's always going to be, you know, taxi level players. Has he done enough to solidify himself as a standout in the NHL, a guy who deserves to be there day in day out? Frankly, he hasn't. But I think with some of the way that the bottom six has been playing, I think it's fair to say that you give him a shot to play in a run of games. And I don't know if the outcome is going to be all that different, better, worse. I'm not sure, but I'd be happy to see it, be given a chance. You know what I mean? I I'd like to see him get a run of games in the NHL again, just because it has been so long. And with the way I love Curtis Lazar, but I think a healthy scratch could go a long way for a guy like him, at least for a few games.
Yeah.
And look at what Dowling's been able to do. He's played 30 NHL games this year. He's been in the NHL more than he hasn't this season. And I know that might feel fast for a lot of people. He's only got 3 points, but he's been a pretty bright spot in the Devils' bottom six in terms of the way his behavior in the offensive zone, keeping pucks deep, really, stressing forechecks. I really enjoyed watching him. I think Nolan Foot brings a bit of more skill, maybe, but also adds that same type of tenacity that while guys like Bastion have that in spades, haven't been able to really get things going. And that's not to say that the fourth line has always been so bad. I think today that Jesper Bratt disallowed goal doesn't happen if the fourth line doesn't put great pressure on Philly for
Yep.
the minute long shift ahead of that. That was a tired Flyers lineup out there, and of course the goal gets washed out because of the offside. Um, but that's a goal that doesn't happen without that. So there's a winning team here in New Jersey. I really do believe that, even with the guys they've got right now, a cup contending team at that. But I'm okay with from within shaking things up, getting a Nolan Foot involved,
Yeah.
keeping Hallinan up there, getting guys like Lazard to take a scratch, Bastion take a health bomb here and there. And while I like the way Tatar has been playing lately, I mean Tatar's advanced metric, by the way, outstanding for a guy who's only playing his minutes. He's been good, but I think if you bring him in and out of lineup, swap him between the lines like they've been doing with him, um, find the combinations that really get these guys to work hard because I think it's all there. It's just they got to put it together. And now I've said all that. The one name I haven't really mentioned is Eric Paula, who I feel for me has been the most disappointing the Devils forwards this year because he's played
Yeah.
just about every game. He's got 11 points. He really feels like the fourth line center long term for this team,
At
but
least, yeah, maybe
has
next
but
year. Yeah.
but has been treated like the third line center.
Yeah, I think, I'll bring up one name down in the AHL. And most people obviously don't know his name because they just brought him in this offseason. But Adam Beckman has been playing really
Mhm.
good. And he's another
Yeah,
one of those
third in
guys.
points.
Yeah, he's another one of those. All three of these guys bring the same type of, you know, power forwardishness that the Devils are looking for out of their bottom six that, some guys might not be, you know, showing right now.
Mhm.
Obviously, we all love Nate Bastion, but he's still dealing with his broken jaw. He's still rocking the bubble.
He's got the
You
fishbowl.
I think maybe giving a guy like that, some time to, heal up or, just watch the game from above and give some of these younger guys some run because, obviously Bass is on an expiring deal. He might not be here next year. Maybe one of these guys could take that spot if they're given the opportunity because seeing Beckman down in the AHL, he's got a shot on him. Obviously, another lefty. I know you don't like the lefties. There's too many, but I feel like another
Bottom
guy
six,
that's
no, the bottom six has a pretty good distribution, righty lefty. That's fine.
him being 6'2", just around 190 pounds, but he brings that speed. Like all three of these guys have some speed. They're willing to throw the body. Hallinen's fought down there. Nolan Foote has fought too. I haven't seen Beckman yet fight, but all these guys could bring a spark to the bottom six, and that's just what I'm bringing up. I feel like
Mhm.
if they don't want to spend that big price that teams might be asking for some of these bottom six role players that are on expiring deals, why not give some of these guys a chance? And Hallinan looked really good tonight. He had one chance where he received the pass and he tried to one time it in the slot, just kind of bounced over a stick. I forgot to bring that up, but did you notice the ice was kind of choppy tonight? I feel like the puck was
Well,
bouncing everywhere.
there were look, I've played on that ice many years ago, and it is quite literally the softest ice I've ever touched. Like it's insane. So maybe after the third period of NHLers skating on it for 20 minutes, it gets really choppy. But for me, that's no excuse. That is
No, yeah. I just wanted to
the
bring out
most
because that's what
pristine.
I noticed that just tonight that the puck was just
Pesci took
bouncing
a pretty
everywhere.
nasty. Pesci took a pretty nasty spill, and
Yeah.
I did see like he sure had trouble like trying to scoop the puck out of the zone a couple times. Got caught on a lip in the ice, and that happens when you've got 200-pound guys skating 180 miles an hour
Yeah.
on 200 feet of ice. But I mean, I don't think it's anything to worry about long term. I think the
No,
Devils are
definitely
just
not.
a fast team, and they just make those sort of spills every now and then.
Yeah, and I think, all and then we don't even talk about Gritsuk who's going to come over for next year. If you bring in another top six guy, he's going to be on he's going to be in that third line role, kind of bringing that offensive push. So I think internally they have a lot of good options going forward for the bottom six. It's just that they got to figure it out this year who they kind of want to mix in there. Dowling, you brought up, has been playing really good as a center. Even they moved him up to the third line when Hall has
Yeah, and he's been
been
just as
out.
good.
So I think they have a lot of good internal options. It's just going to be what's the cost of bringing a third line center who's going to bring some, playmaking, offensive ability while being, good in his own zone. That some teams are going to be asking for first round picks. I just saw Yanni Gord might get a first round pick, and I said, yeah, no, out on that. So we'll have to see. Obviously you said once Four Nations come around, trade deadline's right around the corner. So I think Fitz is on the phone right now. He's having talks with some teams, and we'll see what happens here.
Yeah. And right now, in terms of trades, we're gonna wait and listen some more. It's still, a month and a half away from the trade deadline, a couple weeks away from Four Nations, and
Yep.
then the Devils get a much needed 2 week break. Hopefully, they figure some things out before then. But if they don't, they'll have 2 weeks off to figure it out. And of course, they'll have a few guys representing their nations in that tournament. Jack Hughes will be with the U.S. Jesper Bratt and Jacob Markstrom will be
Yep.
with Sweden, and Eric Holla will be with Finland. And I think that's it.
We'll talk about that more once it gets closer.
Yeah.
I think we could do a little preview for that.
Yeah, and Dougie Hamilton should be with Team Canada, but I digress. That's all the time we have for Puck on the Parkway this week. The Devils unfortunately don't get it done against the Philadelphia Flyers today, but they got a chance to right the wrong tomorrow. Matinee game against the Ottawa Senators. I hope to be there tomorrow afternoon, and hopefully, if you're listening to this, that game hasn't happened yet, and everything won't be out of date. So, for Daniel Rebane, I've been James Burley. Thank you guys so much for listening, and let's go Devils.
Let's